Why maps? Well, on a personal level, I have always had a fascination with other worlds. I grew up in a working-class family in a mostly working-class community, and although access to other worlds of life was limited, I was always deeply curious about those worlds. When I was a young boy, it was maps that made it possible for me to dream those other worlds up and imaginatively transport myself to other places. Then, on my 10th birthday, I received the gift of a bicycle. To this day, I have never received another gift that meant as much to me as this bicycle, and to this day, I cannot live without access to a bicycle. I now had means of visiting other worlds. Guided by maps, and in the company of my younger brother, our friends, and our dog, Prince, I would ride for whole days into the worlds that neighboured on my community, worlds that I became fascinated with, but was barely able to touch the surface of. I can still recall my wonder on the occasion of first riding into a middle-class world that looked like the American dream of the 1950s, one that had become familiar to me through radio and billboard advertising, and through the few magazines I had managed to get my hands on. The most significant venture out of my world of origin occurred when I was 13. My father had purchased a good car, and we packed up and went on a holiday of a lifetime. A camping trip through southern South Australia into Victoria, a neighbouring state to the east, and all the way to Melbourne via the Great Ocean Road. I was totally unprepared for the immensity of the world that I experienced on this trip. I encountered geographical landscapes and territories of life that I couldn't have imagined, and had adventures that to this day are vivid in my mind. Each evening, in the light of a kerosene lamp, I pored over maps. This contributed significantly to my anticipation of the adventures ahead, and to my acute wakefulness throughout this holiday. I do not recall our having any specific travel goal at the outset of each day, just a number of possible destinations. And the routes to these possible destinations were not predetermined. The principal agenda was to find the most scenic byways. These expeditions into the worlds that neighboured on the community I grew up in, and the memorable journey from Adelaide to Melbourne via the south coast, are in my distant past. But even now, I relish the opportunity to pore over maps, both in the course of travelling for my work and during my preparation for the occasional cross-country journeys I take while piloting Cessna and Piper aircraft. My lifelong fascination for maps has led me to look at them as a metaphor for my work with people who consult me about a range of concerns, dilemmas, and problems. When we sit down together, I know that we are embarking on a journey to a destination that cannot be precisely specified, and via routes that cannot be predetermined. I know that we will probably take some extraordinarily scenic routes to these unknown destinations. I know that as we approach these destinations, we will be stepping into other worlds of experience. And I know that the adventures to be had on these journeys are not about the confirmation of what is already known, but about expeditions into what is possible for people to know about their lives. This is evident in so many ways. For example, in the context of therapeutic conversations, people invariably modify their goals or embrace objectives that suddenly become important to them, making changes that they could not have foreseen at the outset. At the outset of a therapeutic conversation, a person may table an agenda to become more independent, but over the course of the conversation, discard this in favour of a goal to more openly embrace an ethic of partnership in acts of living. Or a couple might initially present a desire to resolve differences in their relationship, but then, midstream in the therapeutic conversation, substitute this with the objective of acknowledging and celebrating difference in their relationship. The maps that I review in this book are, like any maps, constructions that can be referred to for guidance on our journeys. In this case, on our journeys with the people who consult us about the predicaments and problems of their lives. Like other maps, they can be employed to assist us in finding our way to destinations that could not have been specified ahead of the journey, via routes that could not have been predetermined. And, like other maps, the maps that I present in this book contribute to an awareness of the diversity of avenues that are available to preferred destinations, avenues that can be charted and rendered familiar. I have formulated these maps over the years principally in response to requests from others to render more transparent the therapeutic processes that I have developed. I will emphasize here that the maps of this book are not the maps of narrative practice, or a true and correct guide to narrative practice, whatever narrative practice is taken to be. As the author of these maps, it is important for me to emphasize that I do not use them to police my conversations with the people who consult me. Therapeutic conversations are not ordered, and I make no effort to determine my response to people's expressions ahead of these expressions. I am aware, however, that maps like those presented in this book help me to respond to people in ways that open opportunities for them to explore neglected aspects of the territories of their own lives. This provides people with avenues of possibility for addressing the predicaments and problems of their lives in ways that they wouldn't have imagined. Maps like these share a therapeutic inquiry in which people suddenly find themselves interested in novel understandings of the events of their lives, curious about aspects of their lives that have been forsaken, fascinated with neglected territories of their identities, and, at times, awed by their own responses to the predicaments of their existence. And I believe that maps like these shape a therapeutic inquiry that contributes to the rich development of therapists' stories about their work and about their lives generally, which can be a source of inspiration. This has certainly been true for me. On occasion, in teaching contexts, I have been asked why it is necessary to have maps for therapeutic practice. My response: it is not at all necessary. However, I believe that we all refer to guiding ideas of some sort in the development of therapeutic conversations, although very often these guiding ideas have become so taken for granted and accepted that they are rendered invisible and unavailable to critical reflection. I believe that this is a hazardous development, for it has the potential to restrict us to the unquestioned reproduction of what is familiar in terms of therapeutic practice, regardless of the consequences on the lives of the people who consult us. Having said this, I do appreciate the fact that not everyone will relate to the map and journey metaphors, and that there is a whole world of metaphors that can be used to characterize therapeutic practices. I welcome efforts to translate the practices described in this book into terms associated with alternative metaphors. I should also note that therapists who are unfamiliar with the maps described in this book may initially find them awkward, unnatural, or unspontaneous to use. This is to be expected. When new territories of therapeutic conversation are being entered into, it can take considerable time to become familiar with such territories and to become proficient in the skills associated with these explorations. The key is practice, practice, and more practice. Interestingly, it is this rigorous practice that enables spontaneity. The expressions of life that seem most spontaneous to us are those that we have had the most practice in. As is the case for musicians who perform skillful improvisation, good improvisation in the context of therapeutic conversations is found on meticulous attention to the development of therapeutic skills. and the possibility for the further development of our skills is never-ending. I view my own practice as an apprenticeship without end, knowing that I will never arrive at a place where I will be wholly satisfied with my contribution to effective therapeutic conversations. To date, there has not been one occasion on which I could say that I wouldn't change some sort of aspect of my contribution to a therapeutic conversation if I had the opportunity to start all over again. This acknowledgement is not to negatively judge or devalue my part in these conversations, and it does not subtract from the enjoyment that I experience in them. Rather, it is about maintaining a reflective perspective on what I do as a therapist. For me, taking a journey into the unknown with a map in hand always fills me with anticipation. I hope that in the writing of this book, I have managed to convey a sense of the delight and fascination that I routinely experience in journeys undertaken in therapeutic conversations. And I hope that the maps that I have presented in this book will be useful to you, the listener, in your own explorations of therapeutic practice.